March 15, 1943, somewhere in the ruins of Kharkov. Hauptmann Wilhelm Krause pressed his back against the frozen brick wall, listening to Soviet boots crunching through rubble in the darkness ahead. His unit had been issued the new weapon just 3 days ago. The MP-43, they called it. Germany's answer to Soviet submachine guns, 30 rounds of intermediate cartridge in a selective fire rifle that could switch between single shots and full automatic. Revolutionary, the ordnance officers had promised. A weapon that would change infantry combat forever. Krause squeezed the trigger, nothing happened. He pulled back the charging handle. The bolt was frozen solid, locked in place by a combination of carbon fouling and the -25-degree temperature. Around him he could hear the mechanical clicking of other weapons in his unit failing the same way. The Soviets were 50 meters away, and closing. His revolutionary weapon had become a worthless club. What German infantry discovered in the winter of 1943 would expose a truth more damaging than any mechanical failure. The weapon Hitler had personally banned, then secretly approved, then banned again, then finally accepted, wasn't just unreliable. It represented something far worse. Germany had invented the future of infantry warfare but lacked the industrial capacity, materials, and quality control to actually produce it. They had created the first true assault rifle, a design so influential that every modern military rifle descends from it, yet they built it so poorly that frontline troops often threw it away in favor of captured Soviet weapons. This is the story of the Sturmgewehr 44 and its predecessor, the MP-43. Not a tale of German engineering excellence, but of corners cut, materials substituted, and promises broken. A weapon that could have changed the war, reduced instead to a desperate compromise that revealed Germany's collapsing industrial capability. To understand how Germany created and then ruined the assault rifle, you have to understand the problem it was meant to solve. By 1941, German infantry doctrine had hit a wall. Studies of combat in Poland and France revealed that most firefights occurred at ranges under 300 meters. The standard Khan 98 caliber rifle, accurate to 800 meters with its powerful 7.92 Kashi 57mm cartridge, was over-engineered for actual combat. Its 5-round magazine required constant reloading. Its bolt-action mechanism was too slow for close combat. One shot, work the bolt, one shot, work the bolt. Soviet soldiers with PPS-41 submachine guns could spray 900 rounds per minute. The Wehrmacht issued MP-40 submachine guns to squad leaders and assault troops, but the 9mm pistol cartridge was only effective to about 100 meters. This created a gap. Too close for rifles, too far for submachine guns. German infantry found themselves outgunned in the brutal urban combat that characterized the Eastern Front. The solution seemed obvious. Create a weapon firing a cartridge more powerful than pistol rounds but less powerful than rifle rounds. Give it selective fire capability, single shots for distance, automatic fire for close combat. The concept was revolutionary. The execution would prove catastrophic. Development began in 1938 at Werke in Magdeburg. The new cartridge, designated 7.92 33mm Kurz, was essentially a shortened version of the standard rifle round. Less powder, lighter bullet, reduced recoil. A soldier could carry twice as much ammunition for the same weight. Hugo Schmeisser at CG Hanel and Werner Gruner at Walther competed to design weapons for this cartridge. Here's where the problems started. Hitler personally opposed the entire concept. He believed in long-range rifle marksmanship, considering automatic fire wasteful. The traditional Prussian military culture emphasized the rifleman's skill. One shot, one kill. Spray and pray was for inferior armies that couldn't train proper marksmen. Hitler refused to authorize development. The German Army Weapons Office continued the program in secret. They hid it under the designation Maschinenpistole 43 inches, Machine Pistol 43 Nace, making it sound like an improved submachine gun rather than a revolutionary new weapon. This deception would have consequences. Funding was limited. Priority for materials was low. Quality control was minimal. The weapon was being developed in shadows without proper resources. When Hitler discovered the deception in 1943, he exploded in rage. Then frontline reports arrived. Troops who had received early production MP-43s were achieving remarkable results. One report from the 93rd Infantry Division claimed that soldiers with MP-43s had 4 times the combat effectiveness of those with conventional weapons. Hitler, ever mercurial, suddenly reversed position. Not only was production approved, it was accelerated. The weapon was renamed Sturmgewehr assault rifle, reportedly by Hitler himself. But accelerated production meant compromised quality. Germany in 1943 faced catastrophic shortages. Chrome for barrel lining was unavailable, allocated to tank production. Proper steel alloys were reserved for artillery and aircraft engines. The Sturmgewehr would be built with whatever materials remained. The barrel, without chrome lining, wore out after approximately 6,000 rounds. Under sustained automatic fire, this could happen in days. The receiver, made from stamped steel to save manufacturing time, was prone to deformation. The spot welds holding it together could crack under stress. The pressed steel parts were supposed to make production faster and cheaper, but poor quality control meant tolerances varied wildly. Parts from one rifle wouldn't fit another. The fire selector switch, positioned on the left side where right-handed shooters couldn't easily reach it, would freeze in position. Carbon buildup from the gas system combined with dirt and moisture to lock the mechanism. Soldiers couldn't switch between semi-automatic and full automatic fire. The weapon would stick in whatever position it happened to be in when it seized. The magazine, a 30-round curved design, was revolutionary in concept but terrible in execution. The stamped steel feed lips bent easily. A bent magazine meant constant jamming. The spring was too weak, leading to failures to feed. In cold weather, the spring lost even more tension. Soldiers learned to load only 25 rounds to reduce pressure on the spring, defeating the purpose of the 30-round capacity. Production numbers tell the quality story. In 1943, 8,000 MP-43, 8,000 MP-43. Of these frontline units rejected nearly 2,000 as defective. That's a 25% rejection rate for a weapon desperately needed at the front. By comparison, Soviet PPS-41 production, using even cruder manufacturing techniques, achieved rejection rates under 5%. The 93rd Infantry Division received 500 MP-43s in January 1943 for combat trials near Stalingrad. After 2 weeks, 180 weapons were non-functional. The division's after-action report stated, "The weapon shows excellent tactical potential but suffers from inadequate manufacturing quality." Soldiers have more confidence in captured Soviet weapons. Think about that. German soldiers preferred Soviet weapons over their own revolutionary design, not because the Soviet weapons were better designed, but because they actually worked when needed. Gewehräter Hans Müller, serving with the 78th Sturm Division, wrote to his wife in March 1943, "We received new automatic rifles last week. Very impressive on the range. In combat, different story. Mine stopped working on the second day. The cold, the mud, something always breaks. I traded it for a Russian gun, less accurate but it shoots when I pull the trigger." The Sturmgewehr's gas system, innovative for its time, proved particularly vulnerable. Carbon buildup from the gas port would accumulate in the gas tube. In the extreme cold of the Eastern Front, this carbon would combine with condensation and freeze. The operating rod would seize. The weapon became a manually operated rifle, requiring the charging handle to be worked for every shot, slower than the bolt-action rifles it was meant to replace. German manuals specified cleaning the gas system every 200 rounds. In combat, this was impossible. Firefights were measured in minutes, not round counts. Soldiers didn't have time to disassemble and clean weapons during battle. The theoretical maintenance schedule met the reality of combat and lost. The ammunition itself became a problem. The 7.92 33mm Kurz round was new. Production facilities had to be created from scratch. Quality varied enormously between manufacturers. Steel-cased ammunition, used to save brass, would stick in chambers. The different expansion rates of steel versus brass meant extraction failures were common. The extractor would rip through the case rim, leaving the spent case stuck in the chamber. By late 1943, units equipped with Sturmgewehrs required double the normal ammunition allocation. Not because they fired more rounds, but because so much ammunition was defective. Soldiers had to carry extra ammunition just to account for rounds that wouldn't fire, wouldn't extract, or caused jams. The 5th SS Panzer Division Viking received 2,000 Sturmgewehrs in September 1943. Their combat assessment after the battles around Kiev was damning. The Sturmgewehr represents a significant tactical advancement but suffers from systematic manufacturing deficiencies. Approximately 40% of weapons experience stoppages during sustained combat. Recommend retention of conventional weapons until production quality improves. Production quality never improved. It got worse. By 1944, Allied bombing had devastated German industry. The factories producing Sturmgewehrs were hit repeatedly. Skilled workers were drafted into the Wehrmacht and replaced by forced laborers who had every incentive to sabotage production. Quality control, already inadequate, essentially ceased to exist. Late production Sturmgewehrs were disasters. Receivers made from increasingly poor steel would crack after a few thousand rounds. Barrels made from inferior alloys would bulge or split. The spot welds holding the weapon together would fail under recoil. Weapons literally fell apart during use. The official production numbers claim 425,977 Sturmgewehrs were manufactured. The reality was more complex. Many weapons counted as produced were assembled from rejected parts, cannibalized from damaged weapons or failed inspection but were sent to the front anyway. Functional weapons that actually worked reliably, perhaps half the official number. Meanwhile, the Soviets produced 6 million PPS-41 submachine guns. Crude weapons, yes. Inaccurate at range, yes. But they worked. In the mud of autumn, the snow of winter, the dust of summer, they fired when the trigger was pulled. That reliability mattered more than theoretical superiority. American forces first encountered Sturmgewehrs during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. Initial reports expressed alarm. The German infantry had automatic rifles while Americans still carried semi-automatic Moen-Garons. Intelligence bulletins warned of this new German superweapon. But frontline assessments told a different story. Staff Sergeant James Patterson, 2nd Infantry Division, reported, "We captured a dozen of those new German rifles at Rochereth. Impressive-looking weapons. We test-fired them. 3 jammed within the first magazine. 2 had parts break. We went back to our M1 SES. The U.S. Army Ordnance Department studied captured Sturmgewehrs extensively. Their April 1945 report concluded, the German MP-43/Sturmgewehr represents an innovative design concept that will influence future infantry weapons. However, manufacturing quality is consistently poor. Materials are substandard. Reliability is unacceptable by U.S. standards. The weapon's influence will be in concept, not execution." That assessment proved prophetic. The Sturmgewehr's design influenced every subsequent assault rifle. The AK-47, the MR-16, the FN-FLN, all descended from the German concept of an intermediate cartridge selective fire rifle, but they succeeded where the Sturmgewehr failed because they were built properly, with adequate materials under proper quality control. Soviet designers studying captured Sturmgewehrs were particularly interested. Mikhail Kalashnikov would later acknowledge examining the German weapon during his development of the AK-47. But he learned what not to do as much as what to do. The AK-47 was designed for simplicity, reliability, and ease of manufacture. Everything the Sturmgewehr should have been but wasn't. The tragedy of the Sturmgewehr was that Germany got the concept right but the execution catastrophically wrong. They invented the future but couldn't build it. They created the assault rifle but manufactured it so poorly that soldiers preferred obsolete weapons that actually worked. This failure reflected larger German problems. Over-engineering when simple solutions worked better. Pursuing advanced technology without the industrial base to support it. Making promises that production couldn't fulfill. The Wehrmacht needed weapons that worked in harsh conditions. Instead, they got weapons that looked impressive but failed when needed most. German propaganda films showed Waffen-SS troops training with Sturmgewehrs, spraying automatic fire at targets, demonstrating German technical superiority. The reality was different. Those same troops would enter combat with weapons that jammed, broke, or simply stopped working. The automatic fire that looked so impressive in propaganda films was often impossible in actual combat because the fire selector had seized or the gas system had failed. By April 1945, As Soviet forces closed on Berlin, Sturmgewehr production had essentially ceased. The factories were destroyed or captured. Raw materials were exhausted. The skilled workers were dead, fled, or conscripted. The last Sturmgewehrs produced were crude shadows of the original design, assembled from whatever parts remained. Volkssturm units defending Berlin were issued Sturmgewehrs, often without ammunition. The weapons that were supposed to give German infantry superiority had become symbols of a collapsing regime issuing unusable weapons to untrained old men and boys. The revolutionary assault rifle had been reduced to a propaganda prop, impressive to look at but useless in combat. Soviet forces advancing through Germany captured thousands of Sturmgewehrs. Most were discarded as unreliable. Some were sent back for study. The Soviets learned valuable lessons about what worked and what didn't. Those lessons influenced the development of the AK-47, which would become everything the Sturmgewehr should have been: simple, reliable, effective, and producible in massive quantities. Today, the Sturmgewehr is remembered as the first assault rifle. Military historians correctly identify it as revolutionary. Its influence on small arms development was enormous. Every modern military rifle owes something to its design. But that historical importance obscures the reality of what it actually was: a brilliant concept ruined by poor execution. Museums display Sturmgewehrs as examples of German innovation. Collectors pay enormous sums for surviving examples. Video games feature it as a powerful weapon. The mythology has overtaken the reality. The weapon that German soldiers threw away in favor of Soviet submachine guns has become a legendary piece of military technology. The truth was different. The Sturmgewehr was a weapon that promised revolution but delivered disappointment. It could have changed infantry combat if built properly. Instead, it became another example of German military technology that looked impressive but failed in practice. The nation that invented the assault rifle couldn't build one that worked reliably. The few German veterans who survived the war and would speak honestly about their equipment told consistent stories. The Sturmgewehr was brilliant when it worked. The problem was it rarely worked for long. In the brutal combat of the Eastern Front, in the mud and snow and blood, reliability mattered more than innovation. A weapon that jammed when you needed it most was worse than no weapon at all. That was the Sturmgewehr's fatal secret. Not that it was a bad design. It wasn't. Not that it was poorly conceived. It was revolutionary. But that Germany in 1943 to 1945 simply could not manufacture it properly. They had invented the future of infantry combat but lacked the industrial capacity to build it. They had created tomorrow's weapon with yesterday's depleted resources. The assault rifle would indeed change warfare. But it would be the AK-47, not the Sturmgewehr, that would arm the world's infantry. Built simply, manufactured properly, designed for reliability over sophistication. Everything the Germans should have done but couldn't or wouldn't. When Hauptmann Wilhelm Krauss pulled that trigger in the ruins of Kharkov and nothing happened, he was experiencing more than mechanical failure. He was experiencing the collapse of German military industry, the failure of the Nazi war machine, the gap between propaganda and reality. His revolutionary weapon, frozen solid and useless, perfectly symbolized the Wehrmacht's position by 1943, possessing superior designs but unable to execute them. The Sturmgewehr changed military history, just not the way Germany intended. It showed the world what infantry weapons could become. Then it showed the world how not to build them. Both lessons proved valuable. Both shaped the conflicts that followed. The weapon that couldn't work reliably in German hands inspired the weapons that would define warfare for the next 80 years. That's the real legacy of the Sturmgewehr. Not the revolutionary success Germany promised, but the educational failure that taught the world what actually mattered in military weapons. Not innovation, but execution. Not sophistication, but reliability. Not propaganda, but performance when everything depended on pulling a trigger and having the weapon actually fire.